The Agincourt Campaign, a king's audacious path. Amidst the muddy depths and malice of medieval conflict, on a rain-soaked October day in 1415, a youthful English monarch advanced toward destiny. King Henry V, armed with daring and afflicted by illness, trod a perilous route. His contingent was modest, outnumbered, a mere 6,000 souls trembling from hunger and Harfleur's grueling siege. Across Agincourt's fields, his adversaries loomed. 20,000 French warriors, clad in armor and burning with fury, yearned for his downfall. In a realm where mire consumed knights whole and shafts fell from shrouded heavens, Henry sought merely a passage. Yet what he unearthed was an epic. Immerse yourself, witness history's lethal choreography, a king's ambition and the political tapestry. As we untangle the threads of time, we find ourselves drawn into the medieval fabric of Henry V's improbable quest for authority. Picture a world forged by steel, gore, and fate's unyielding hold. Here stands Henry, a sovereign without divine endorsement, yet audacious enough to assert his claim to France's throne. More than mere arrogance, this was a calculated maneuver interwoven with the intricate tapestry of medieval statecraft, an era where ancient animosities could ignite the flames of war, engulfing nations in perpetual strife. With claims disputed and dismissed, Henry embarked on a pursuit for territory, legitimacy, and enduring renown. Propelled toward a fate chronicled in history's annals, Henry V is often hailed as a warrior monarch, his triumphs celebrated and dramatized in songs and dramas. Yet beneath the steel in his assertion lay a visionary, a ruler captivated by ambitions grand enough to consume him. His formation was grounded in chivalric ideals and concepts of divine right, a fusion of the poetic and the practical. At his core, Henry was guided by introspection amidst a world defined by savagery. Amidst battle's din, his armor recounted sagas not solely of conquest, but of a king ensnared by his own aspiring fantasies. A truth that would ultimately unfold at Agincourt. The arduous journey to France. The voyage to France was fraught with difficulties from the outset. Jam-packed vessels navigated the treacherous English Channel, carrying knights, men-at-arms, and archers bound by exigency rather than glory. The mixed aroma of brine, perspiration, and trepidation became their constant companion as men leaned over the rails, battling illness and the medieval sea's volatile disposition. Upon reaching France, they confronted an unforgiving landscape. An illness ravaged their ranks without distinction. Dysentery and fever transformed this military undertaking into a struggle against not just a foreign foe, but nature itself. Against this backdrop of suffering and resolve, the English soldiers pressed onward, embodying resilience even as defeat seemed imminent. Logistics, strategy, and unseen forces. Venturing deeper into France demanded more than mere bravery. It required meticulous logistics. Nourishing an army was a monumental task, each morsel of bread an accomplishment amidst the medieval supply chain's capricious nature. When provisions vanished, soldiers resorted to pillaging, hoping for fortune when calculations faltered. Amid such adversity, King Henry comprehended that victories were not solely determined on battlefields, but through astute strategies. Beyond the arrows and steel were spies, clandestine messages, the unseen forces binding this narrative, as vital as the tempest of arrows awaiting the French at Agincourt. In foresight and adaptability, Henry's resolve was steeled, a testament to a leader orchestrating his destiny with unmatched skill. The English contingent was a mosaic of individuals, each bearing distinct loyalties and motivations under a shared standard. Within this milieu, personal aspirations intersected with royal objectives, creating a terrain rife with intrigue and shifting allegiances whispered around campfires. Warfare, the unwavering equalizer, forged allies and adversaries from desire and necessity. Fault lines within human spirits often dictated outcomes, imbuing narratives like Agincourt with depth beyond clashes of kings and soldiers. A chronicle of humanity in its stark, unembellished reality. In this medieval saga, European geopolitics unfolded like a chessboard, where rulers made audacious maneuvers, and soldiers were mere pawns in a contest dictated by territory, titles, and lineages. Entangled in this dance were the French and English crowns, their hostilities a network of roots that intertwined past entitlements and royal decrees. Henry's resolve to reclaim Normandy and reinstate Plantagenet honor underpinned his every step into French territory, a duty predicated on reaffirming his reign's divine purpose. Each move was shadowed by age-old royal feuds that influenced every blade drawn and shield raised upon Agincourt's stage. Harfleur loomed as a reminder, a siege that blended triumph with grim fortitude, its echo serving as cautionary notes. Henry had anticipated swift success, but disease and attrition tested his tenacity. Though the town fell, it foreshadowed the immense cost of future campaigns, reminding soldiers of the brutal realities awaiting beyond Agincourt's threshold. A lesson learned and relearned as they approached another confrontation with destiny's uncertain embrace. Approaching Agincourt, anticipation and resilience. Every soldier felt the weight of anticipation as Agincourt approached, a convergence of human resilience against the backdrop of unwavering resolve. Preparations were made, not only in arms but in spirit. Stories shed their innocence, transforming into tales of impending arrows and war cries that would resonate through time. As those in the camp shared whispered hopes and fears, history's very essence beckoned. Here lay an opportunity more than resolution. It was a pledge to face fate's enigma with bravery, shaping their narratives in the mire of uncertainty. Fate awaited at Agincourt. The question was whose story it would narrate. The toll of Harfleur and the march to Calais. The siege of Harfleur was a victory that came at a high price. The scent of decay and the threat of illness haunted King Henry's soldiers as they struggled to comprehend a grim achievement. Although the port city was theirs, the men paid dearly with bodies weakened by the bloody flux, a malady that consumed them with ruthless efficiency. A proud army now trudged in the shadows of their own mortality, faces gaunt from hunger and exhaustion. Each stride on the saturated French earth demanded resolve, forged in hardship unimaginable today. The laughter once shared around campfires was replaced by groans and whispers of despair. The triumphant Harfleur felt hollow, overshadowed by looming famine and the specter of pestilence. Weakened by the siege, Henry's tattered force stumbled northward towards Calais, a sanctuary they could scarcely reach. Their march was a trial of endurance, a test against a landscape scarred by conflict. Ruined fortifications and deserted villages marked their path, serving as somber reminders of their precarious journey through hostile territory. Venturing through Picardy's dense forests and sprawling plains exposed them to the elements without the protection of shelters or consistent sustenance. Each league conquered testified to their fortitude over sanity. As hope thinned as much as their cloaks, the ground turned perilous, muddy tracks impeding progress and draining strength. As shadowy French forces trailed them in the distance, the English braced against visible and invisible adversaries. The trek towards Calais was anything but simple. Facing the French host, the clouds loomed ominously over the weary army as they neared Agincourt. Another formidable opponent awaited them, the amassed French forces. The prospect of immediate battle struck fear into Henry's men, still recovering from Harfleur. The French boasted a reinforced and vengeful force that vastly outnumbered theirs. Anticipation tightened its grip on the English spirit. Whispers of French superiority filtered through Henry's ranks, intensifying their dread as they pressed towards a seemingly unyielding fate at Agincourt. Forcing themselves forward, they couldn't ignore the gleam of enemy armor in the distance, promising a bloody dawn. Nature's treachery, the muddy battlefield. The route to Agincourt was itself a snare laid by nature. Relentless downpours transformed every step into a wrestling match with thick, grasping mud. The very earth sought to drag them down, compounding their exhaustion and reducing their morale to dust. Though weary, each squelching mile marked a defiant stand against the elements urging them to yield. Horses too struggled in the mire, their strength strained to the limit as they transported supplies over treacherous paths. In this relentless march through damp, hostile terrain, the men found their tenacity tested much like their weapons in battle. Disease and despair, the human cost. Amidst relentless rain and mud, dysentery continued its assault. Soldiers succumbed quietly, hands clasped over fragile spirits as they battled their own bodies. Known all too well among the ranks, it sapped strength, leaving behind a poignant reminder of mortality. Little understood medically, dysentery's toll reached beyond flesh, corroding the mental resolve of even the most steadfast. Yet through the squalor, shared struggles forged an unbreakable camaraderie as powerful as any chainmail. Laughter persisted, subdued but present, as fellowship fought to keep despair at bay. Starvation haunted their daily routine. The clatter of empty pots echoed through camp, a dirge of war's unromantic reality. Meager portions turned meals into survival rituals. As resources dwindled, resourcefulness and resilience became the new currency. Soldiers sought solace in whatever provisions they could gather, scavenged roots and hunted game, a high price in uncertain times. Sharing what little they had strengthened bonds further, proving strength often emerged not from abundance, but adversity. This unity forged a fierce resolve, sustaining them when all else was lost. Foraging for survival. Foragers became unlikely heroes, venturing into unfamiliar territories, seeking nourishment. As skilled hunters out of necessity, they darted through fields, risking their lives for sustenance. Rewards varied, caches of grain occasionally surfaced, prized beyond gold. Some trips returned empty-handed or met with hostile ambushes. Foraging was life balanced on a precarious edge, a calculated gamble in a conflict defined by unpredictability. Each return brought not only essential supplies, but tales of danger and triumph. Despite the omnipresent shadow of conflict, the English force found light within themselves. Stripped of comfort and certainty, their spirits found rejuvenation in humor and shared hardships. Mirth danced precariously amid solemn duty, revitalizing their resolve. The camaraderie binding them was unspoken, but deeply felt in shared glances and supportive arms. Morale flickered, yet held strong, shaped by a shared journey through unimaginable adversities. The French gathering, pride and vengeance. Meanwhile, the French forces observed and awaited with poised anticipation, vengeance simmering from past grievances. Mindful of English advancements, they amassed strength in numbers and confidence. Their pride, stung by earlier setbacks, sought retribution on home ground. Knights donned gleaming armor, eager for lasting glory and vengeance. The English advanced ever closer to an inevitable confrontation, the French forming a barrier that promised doom, yet demanded respect. The eve of battle, anticipation, and destiny. As Agincourt drew near, time seemed to pause its flow, anticipation hanging heavy like a gathering storm. The symphony of preparation resonated alongside fear that crept insidiously into the soul. Yet a profound tranquility settled over the English lines. Soldiers moved not just through terrain, but toward a defining juncture. Each step echoed with acceptance of destiny's uncertainty, a march where courage met inevitability. The dawn would soon break upon Agincourt's field, bearing witness to a collision of aspirations and resilience that history would not soon forget. The French army assembles, a tapestry of diversity. The French army assembled with a clamor of clanking armor and a muted thirst for vengeance. Stories of English incursions had been fueling fires of resentment for years. Among the banners of chivalric duty, every lord brought his retinue, knights in gleaming steel, eager squires, and bands of infantry who exchanged their plows for polearms. This wasn't merely a display of strength, it was a fervent cry for retribution. In medieval France, the battlefield was where honor was won and lost. As the morning sun cast its golden hue over the ranks, knights became more than warriors. They were icons, embodiments of honor and bravery. Each sword drawn was a pledge of fidelity. Each helmet donned a declaration of purpose. The air was charged with a blend of personal vendettas and national pride. The French forces were a mosaic of diversity, a mix as varied as their intentions. Noble knights shone under their plumes, while foot soldiers in leather and chain prepared to launch themselves into the fray. Mounted on destriers, the nobility formed a stark contrast to nimble crossbowmen stationed in their shadows. The camp was filled with the sense of tanned hide and iron mingling with sweat-soaked wool, a testament to the melting pot of skills and statuses gathered for war. Amidst the riot of battle colors, pennons fluttered in the wind, each emblem a badge of family lineage and knightly pride. More than mere adornment, these banners were symbols of order amid chaos, rallying points where soldiers could find their kin in battle's turmoil. The peasant levies, the raw muscle. Beneath the sheen of chivalry lay the campaign's raw muscle, the peasant levies. These men had swapped tools for weapons, driven by their feudal lords' relentless demands. Their hands, once skilled in fieldwork, now gripped crude spears and axes. They fought with a courage drawn from their native soil, their inclusion a reminder of the feudal bargain, loyalty for protection and sustenance. Yet for the common soldier, unfamiliar ground awaited, a blur of chaos and demise. Despite this, courage coursed through their veins, hopes buoyed by their noble leaders, who until now had been distant figures of authority. For many, battle was an unprecedented chance to ascend social ranks or become martyrs of fortune. Faith and superstition on the battlefield. For the medieval mind, battles weren't won solely by men, but by divine favor. Into combat, soldiers ventured with blessings stitched into their tunics, prayers whispered like mantras. Priests ministered over troops, imbuing campaigns with an air of sanctity. But beyond sanctioned rites lay a web of superstitions. Soldiers eyed falling stars with apprehension, read fate in the flight of crows. Charms against misfortune were tucked into armor. In these beliefs lay a semblance of control over an unpredictable future, a comfort that intertwined inseparably with war's blood and iron. French fervor for revenge. The French were driven by a fervor for retribution. English incursions had left scars, burned villages, and vanished crops that haunted memories. Indignation fanned the flames of their tenacity. Agincourt wasn't just another skirmish. It was a chance to rectify deep-seated grievances. Amid the noise of preparation, noble commands rang through the air, eyes hard with intent to make the English pay for every transgression. Revenge lent strength to their swords, a deeply moral force that felt righteous. In fire halls, knights listened to tales of ruined lands, their resolve hardening like forged steel beneath the noble banners of ancestors. Leadership and medieval order. Commanders like Charles d'Albret were central to translating chaotic fervor into strategic order. This leadership was a blend of honor-bound duty, trust, and calculated decision-making. Plans devised over campfires took form in marshy landscapes. Loyalty and honor stood at the core of every command, binding men to their leaders' calls. Despite the massive scale, medieval order maintained cohesion. Battles often played like chess games, with leaders dictating the movements that would determine the conflict's trajectory. The weight of historical expectations pressed heavily on French shoulders. Veterans recounted glorious campaigns to inspire younger counterparts. Such an assembly promised swift victory, and nobility's presence added a grave seriousness. Calais couldn't become another blemish on their chivalric record. Their aspirations were laced with mythic potential, burdens as securely bound as any armor. History was both teacher and tormentor, casting shadows of past defeats and igniting aspirations. For these warriors, every link in history's chain was a binding agent of hope and memory, woven into the fabric of present opportunities. The dawn of battle, a somber transition. As dawn broke, an expectant hush settled over the troops, marking a transition from serenity to the looming specter of violence. The final preparations had a solemnity to them as men mentally prepared for the chaos to follow. Confessions murmured under brooding skies gave clarity to frightened souls. Blessings were imparted with grave hands. The rites of preparation concluded, and men lined up breathing as one. The first rays of the sun transformed anticipation into reality. The French army, powerful and proud, surged forward, a wave of steel destined to collide against English lines. The stage was set for history to unfold amidst muddy fields and relentless resolve. The battlefield, nature's trap. The battlefield of Agincourt was hardly an ideal location for a confrontation. Nestled between dense woods, it felt more like a trap waiting to spring than a grand stage for combat. Heavy rains had saturated the ground for days, turning the field into a deceptive sea of mud, lying deceptively still as dawn crept over the faint landscape. Beneath this dreary sky, the scene remained eerily silent, an unsettling calm before the tempest. For the English, already depleted and weary, the mire seemed a prelude to an inevitable end, whether victory or annihilation. The French, with their dazzling armor and overwhelming numbers, viewed the disheveled English encampment as easy prey, a testament to their presumed invincibility. Yet beneath this facade of confidence, the land whispered another narrative, a tale of primal fear hidden behind the haunting clank of armor and the ghostly flutter of banners in the misty breeze. The mud, a silent participant. To an untrained eye, the muddy terrain might appear a minor nuisance, but it was in truth a silent participant poised to determine men's fates. The rain-soaked earth, already strained under the weight of armored knights and destriers, would become a quagmire from which escape was a dwindling hope. The field's constricted boundaries, as if designed by some malevolent force, would soon compress the waves of French knights, transforming their mass strength into a downfall. The English, compelled by circumstance into hardened pragmatists, perceived opportunity within the shifting mire. While French nobility envisioned gallant charges amidst clashing steel, the English understood mud as an ally, the relentless rain as an unseen accomplice, tipping fortune's scales in a world governed by grim necessity. When war's winds began to howl, the very elements now conspired to favor the battle-worn English soldiers. The rain had not merely softened the ground, but transformed it, creating a slick, adhesive force that clung to boots and hooves alike, dragging each step backward into the earth's cold embrace. The battlefield's egalitarian nature. In this theater of absurdity, rough terrain blurred the rigid lines of class and armor that defined medieval warfare. This battlefield, dictated by nature's will, allowed the English, hungry, sick, and outnumbered, to withstand the onslaught of those boasting noble lineage in gleaming armor. Triumph lay not in might, but adaptability. And the English, tempered by hardship, learned that fortune smiled not just on the bold, but on the resourceful. The field flanked by dense woods guided French knights into narrow corridors, where cavalry's speed and skill devolved into futile thrashing. Here, strategic plans unraveled. Battle strategies once adorned with grandeur were ripped apart by mud and desperation. At Agincourt, cavalry became a cursed blessing, a liability compared to the agile archers and resolute men-at-arms of the English. This paradox played out vividly, where nature's wrath intertwined with tactical maneuvering, and the rain itself whispered survival secrets to the astute. The English, attuned to these whispers, found strength in old trees' roots and the fluctuating lines of a precarious reality. Armor, symbol and shackle. Armor, a proud symbol of nobility, became an iron manacle that day, transforming knightly pride into a crippling burden. For the French, gleaming steel suits turned into prisons, ensnaring them in a harsh dance with unyielding mud. The dream of gallant charges dissolved, trapped in the muck as they were dragged down, not by English arrows, but by their weighty defenses. Each step was a struggle, each breath a labor, as the muddy plains consumed resolve with a slow, relentless hunger. Those who once rode with grace found themselves stuck and impeded, their prowess swallowed whole by earth, indifferent to nobility. In stark contrast, the English, many unburdened by heavy armor, moved freely. What had been scorned as poverty turned into unforeseen resilience. Their lack of adornment, once seen as vulnerability, emerged as strength, as agility, meaning survival in a landscape where stillness spelled death. Armor-clad French knights found themselves slowed, each decisive move turning desperate in the mire. In this grim dance, feet intertwined with soil, the vulnerable proved adaptable, turning survival into strategy. The armored French, prisoners to their own momentum, became victims of the very protection they cherished. French hubris and nature's indifference. The grand spectacle of thousands of proud French knights, crests gleaming in the rain, became a tragic absurdity. Misled by their own confidence, assured of victory, they overlooked the elements, their pride blinding them to the earth's warnings. Proclaiming valor, blinded by hubris, they ignored omens, marching their destiny into chaos. Nature cares little for human arrogance. When she acts, man's intentions falter. The royal banners loftily defying the elements proved one lesson. Pride, however richly adorned, knows only one end: English adaptability and Henry's finesse. Against such misplaced resolutions, The English found triumph not merely in arms, but in a sharp awareness of circumstance. With King Henry at their helm, they honored the earth's primacy, tailoring ambition to align with the morning's reality. Amidst mud and exhaustion, they exploited environmental strengths. Victory bought not through grand designs, but humble acceptance. Henry heeded the whispered warnings of branches and rain-soaked trails, crafting advantage from careful observations, extracting sustenance from a land molded to endure. So on that fateful day of gore and legend, discretion intertwined with valor, transforming a hard-pressed king's gamble into historic glory. As mud swallowed the battlefield's final sounds, Agincourt sealed itself within time's annals, shadows lingering, whispering in history's darkened corridors. The English longbow, a formidable weapon. In the shadowy depths of medieval warfare, the English longbow emerged as a weapon of formidable might. By Agincourt's time, it had already attained almost mythical status in England. Unlike the shorter bows used elsewhere in Europe, the longbow could propel arrows with overwhelming force across great distances. It transformed ordinary men into lethal sentinels, an idea not lost on the English. Young men were trained from childhood, their formative years shaped by archery practice's discipline. So when the call to arms sounded, England could assemble an army of skilled bowmen. These archers were not merely warriors. They were a cornerstone of England's war strategy. Many hailed from rural backgrounds, bringing an instinctive understanding of both the land and the hunt. The French, dismissing them as mere peasants, gravely underestimated their capabilities. As the battle at Agincourt unfolded, they transformed rain-soaked fields into deadly traps, loosing arrows with a precision that only tireless practice and intimate familiarity with their weapon could produce. Training and tactical deployment. Life for an English longbowman began with rigorous training. From as young as 7, boys dedicated their formative years to mastering the longbow. Law mandated regular practice, forging men who could unleash volleys with remarkable speed. A well-trained archer could fire 10 to 12 arrows a minute, embodying a relentless rhythm of warfare. At Agincourt, these skills were put to a grim test. Positioned strategically at the fringes of the English line, the archers unleashed a barrage of arrows that seemed to darken the sky itself. Entire waves of advancing French cavalry were met with this storm, disordering lines and striking fear deep into enemy ranks. The longbow's devastation. The setting of Agincourt presented a vivid canvas for the battle's unfolding drama. Rain had drenched the fields, transforming the earth into a treacherous quagmire. While the French struggled through the muck, burdened by heavy armor, the English, lighter and more agile, seized the advantage. The longbowmen capitalized on their strategic placement, arranged in lines that created lethal channels of fire. Trees on either side served as natural barricades, the battlefield becoming a place where French knights found themselves ensnared in a deadly shooting gallery. Amidst this chaos, the longbow's capabilities as an instrument of devastation became clear. Fitted with warheads or bodkin points, arrows were engineered to pierce even the strongest French armor. Crafted from ash or birch matched with the aerodynamic grace of goose feathers, they became extensions of the archers themselves, arrows that sliced through the air to deliver death. This calculated mastery of flight and penetration only added to the terror. The psychological impact of the archers cannot be overstated. The sound of arrows streaking overhead, filling the sky like a plague of locusts, carved fear into the hearts of the French. The knowledge that death awaited silently, only revealing itself in the final moment, unraveled morale as thoroughly as any blade. The relentless arcades of arrows not only cut down men in their stride, knights in their elegance, but also unraveled the chivalrous facade of French strategy, turning apparent strength into undeniable fragility. French miscalculations fueled this destruction. French miscalculations and the longbow's triumph. Arriving at Agincourt with expectations of swift and glorious victory, their overconfidence paved the way to disaster. The French regarded their knights as unassailable, failing to account for the deadly precision of the longbow. As battle commenced, this hubris was starkly revealed. Attempts to breach the English lines turned chaotic, the anticipated triumph unraveling in the face of infernal, relentless volleys. The lessons from Agincourt spoke volumes, echoing through the strategies of future conflicts. The effectiveness of the English longbowmen made it clear that battles were no longer ruled solely by armored knights, but by the common man with skill and vision. Beyond individual heroics, the battle illuminated the critical importance of terrain, movement, and strategic diversity. Agincourt became a symbol, cementing the role of the longbow within English martial doctrine and altering the very nature of warfare. The legacy of the archers. Yet the legacy of the archers transcended their fearsome skill. These men, often unrecorded by name, left an indelible mark on history's pages. Their story became a narrative of resilience and synergy, championing the power of commoners to shape destinies against overwhelming odds. Each arrow that flew from their ranks carried with it a whisper of legend, weaving the tale of Agincourt into the larger story of humanity's constant dance with fate, forever illuminating the shadows of the past with their courage and their craft. The men-at-arms holding the line. In the heart of the English line at Agincourt, a small contingent of men-at-arms, roughly 300 in number, stood firm, their spirits as unyielding as the steel they wielded. The dawn of October 25th, 1415 unfolded under a cloak of fog, a deceptive calm before the storm of battle. The heavy, moist earth greeted their feet, a prelude to the grueling test that awaited. Despite the overwhelming odds, these men understood that their survival hinged on their ability to stand their ground. Each felt the weight of their shared duty to protect their king and country, forming the linchpin upon which the day's fate would turn. A palpable anticipation filled the air, as the French forces amassed on the opposite side of the field. Among the men-at-arms, camaraderie was forged in their shared reality, steeled with humor that was dry and sparse against a grim backdrop. In the quiet, the soft clinks of armor underscored an unspoken pact, to hold the line unbroken, to push back the impending French assault. Steel and sweat bound them in a pact of unity, the quiet strength among them louder than any battle cries. The responsibility was immense, entrusted by King Henry himself to form the backbone of the English defense. As the sun struggled through the overcast sky, the battlefield revealed itself as a treacherous quagmire. The rain of previous days had transformed the ground into a sticky morass, challenging every step with muddy resistance. For the men-at-arms holding the center, the earth clung to their boots, sapping their strength with every movement. Yet this terrain played to their advantage, funneling the enemy straight into their grips. Armed with swords, axes, and maces, they relied on their agility and martial skill, the muddy ground demanding a balance only seasoned fighters could provide. The French charge and the English defense. The French cavalry, weighed down by heavy armor, charged forward. But the English stood ready, their lighter gear allowing them greater mobility in the mud. When the French cavalry charged, their spectacle quickly descended into chaos, the muddy ground sapping momentum, turning charge into struggle. Horses stumbled, riders floundered, and in the maelstrom, the English were ready. The clash was brutal as the men-at-arms locked their shields, resisting the first assault with practiced precision. The line bent but never broke, their swords and axes working with deadly efficiency. Even the slick mud underfoot became part of the battle, each step a dance with treachery. The English employed a tactic honed over years of warfare. The shield wall, a bulwark against repeated French attacks. Shields interlocked and shoulders braced, the wall served as both defense and launch pad for counterattacks. Amidst the mud, the soldiers mastered a rhythm of deflecting blows and striking back. This was a game of inches where tight formations outmaneuvered the expansive French charges. At the core stood men who knew that their survival lay in their collective strength. The battlefield became a crucible of endurance. Amidst chaos, each soldier part of a larger dance of defiance. As the chaos raged on, the clash of iron and the cries of the wounded created a cacophonous symphony. In this crucible, personal space evaporated, replaced by a maelstrom, where every movement was the line between life and death. The mud and the fog blurred the chaos, yet within this den, the men-at-arms fought on, instincts carrying them through adrenaline-fueled survival. Sweat, rain, and blood mixed across their visors, turning battle into a visceral tableau where every fighter knew each step, parry, and thrust could be their last. Footing, a weapon in the mud. Footing, while lesser considered, became as crucial as their weapons. Every step a negotiation with the sodden ground. The battlefield was both ally and adversary, one misstep potentially fatal. Here, footwork and martial prowess merged, each step calculated to balance precision with aggression. The English, faced with an unforgiving opponent below, as well as ahead, leveraged their discipline to engage in a tug-of-war with the earth, their footing as much a weapon as their swords. Tales of valor in spiritual armor. As time stretched and the hours passed, tales of survival and valor began to weave through the ranks. Each scar was a story, each strike a testament to endurance. In the narrative of war, individual tales of near misses and miraculous parries crisscrossed among the men, providing brief escapes from the relentlessness. Heroism often came in interventions that etched memories, a shared tapestry of resilience creating bonds amidst the savagery. For these men, the battle was as much spiritual as it was physical, faith intertwined with steel. Each blow an act of divine destiny, charged with protecting belief as fiercely as their lives. The whispers of blessings before battle were talismans against fate. They carried tokens of spiritual armor, unseen yet offering comfort amongst the carnage. Superstition fused with martial skill, guiding their blades as they battled fiercely. Victory and cost. As the tide of battle turned, triumph seeped through the English lines. Against the chaos of combat, the 300 men held firm, their defiance rewarded. Victory, visible through the smoky haze, was a quiet testament to their resilience. Yet beneath the celebration lay a mosaic of cost, a bittersweet awareness of lives lost, even amidst triumph. The survivors felt acutely the price of their impossible stand, a tempered success marking the union of legend with grim reality. If the stoicism and bravery of these knights moved you, give this journey a like. For tales steeped in grit, subscribe to Medieval Grime. We keep history smoked and salted. Thanks for joining us. Stay grimy, and we'll see you next time by the fire. The battlefield's pandemonium. The pandemonium on the battlefield began as arrows rained down relentlessly. The initial French charge met the resolute English defense, transforming the field into a morass of desperation and death. Every attempt to regroup by the French turned the terrain into an insurmountable obstacle course clogged with fallen comrades. Once proud knights, now trapped in their heavy armor, struggled futilely through the quagmire, their efforts to advance hindered by the mud clinging to them like a shroud. Anxiety fueled the agony as the scene disintegrated into pure chaos, where once strategic formations devolved into frenzied primal survival. Panic surged throughout the ranks, spreading confusion and indecision among even the most formidable warriors. This disarray forced the French to abandon strategy, their retreat hindered by the same mire that had ensnared them. English archers and foot soldiers pressed their advantage, closing in with swords, daggers, and mallets as the French line warped under pressure. Disorder reigned, leaving French soldiers scrambling to escape encirclement, archers in hand-to-hand combat. But here, the English archers, now grounded, seized their opportunity. They had shed their bows and embraced the brutal intimacy of hand-to-hand combat, wielding whatever weapon they could grasp. This unanticipated shift underscored the chaos as nimble English archers utilized their speed to devastating effect, exploiting gaps in cumbersome armor with ruthless efficiency. The mud's deadly embrace. Mud, thriving in the deluge, became more than just treacherous terrain. It was an unyielding adversary. This enemy devoured the footing of many French soldiers who drowned not by sword or spear, but suffocation, absorbed into the mucky earth. In this grotesque theater, noble knights who expected to triumph were humbled, reduced to struggling for every breath beneath layers of wet filth. As earth claimed them, the muddy battlefield became a leveler where human dignity dissolved into a primal struggle for air. The irony was unmistakable. The very armor crafted to protect became an inadvertent death trap. Plate armor, once a mark of knighthood, transformed into a grievous burden, turning valorous knights into desperate figures thrashing amidst the bodies of fallen comrades. It was here in pockets of carnage that desperation was palpable. Encumbered by their once majestic defenses, knights writhed within their steel cages, suffocated by their own preparations against the chivalric virtues they championed. The rise of the foot soldier. Against this backdrop, the English foot soldiers, unadorned and unburdened, played a pivotal role, embodying a new breed of warfare that prioritized adaptability over nobility. The French army's intricate strategies unraveled into chaos, leaving aristocrats and nobles among the throng as indistinct as foot soldiers. Battle instructions were lost to the cacophony of combat where individual survival instincts superseded centuries of hierarchical tradition. The vision of an orderly engagement dissolved like a mirage, and what remained was a frantic struggle for control. With the breakdown of command, the disorder turned the French line into an anarchic mass, where banners that once inspired now hung limply, signal bearers drowning in confusion. As death descended indiscriminately, knights and soldiers alike were reminded of mortality's apathy. There was no respite, only the eerie realization that beneath the armor, all faced the same fate. Death's indifferent embrace lent the battle a haunting air, a reminder that in the chaos of war, the same end awaited peasant and prince alike. The victors faced their own stark confrontation with mortality, walking among the field of corpses with an acute awareness of their own impermanence. In this furious clash, the English foot soldier quietly emerged as a force of nature. Agile and pragmatic, they became the ground-bound arbitrators of fate, challenging the entrenched notions of warfare. Their presence attacked the momentum of the French nobility, revealing a radical shift in battlefield dynamics, where determination could eclipse birthright. The English soldiers' steadfastness became the mortar holding their lines together, a vivid manifestation of camaraderie and resilience as they pressed against overwhelming odds. Unity amidst turmoil. Yet amidst the blood and clamor, a formidable spirit stitched the English ranks. Their unyielding morale provided them the strength to endure. Even as chaos swirled and commanders faltered, this unity breathed life into the English lines. They stood resolute, driven not by tactical designations, but by a shared bond, motivating each other beyond the mere demands of survival. Every rallying cry, every push against despair turned turmoil into tenacity, crafting a collective resolve that withstood the horrors around them. Agincourt's symbolism and legacy. Emerging victorious, Agincourt's blood-soaked field stood as more than a battlefield. It became a symbol. Here, where power stretched its limits and fate cast its shadow, a tale of audacity, fortune, and strategic prowess inscribed itself into history. The brutal collision of ideals and reality fostered a storytelling legacy that would captivate the imaginations of generations, weaving through the fabric of time as both a lesson and a lingering enchantment of human endeavor amidst unforgiving trials. The prisoner dilemma, a brutal choice. In the muddy aftermath of the Battle of Agincourt, King Henry V of England stood amidst a hard-won victory, yet faced with an unexpected dilemma. Thousands of French prisoners, including nobles and knights, lay in his camp, a burden that was both logistical and strategic. These were men of high birth, their armors now tarnished, and their presence was not just a symbol of triumph, but a potential threat. Holding them required resources and manpower that Henry could scarcely afford, especially with the shadow of a French counterattack looming over the muddied horizon. His forces, already thinned by disease and exhaustion, could ill afford the distraction or risk posed by such captured enemies. Faced with the gnawing question of maintaining power, Henry weighed his options. Could he risk a prison break? Would reinforcements rally to their brethren's aid? These weren't just passing thoughts. They were the anxious musings of a king at the sharp edge of fortune, where the line between victory and ruin was fragile. With every measure of strategic foresight, Henry made a decision that would echo through the annals of history, executing the prisoners to prevent an uprising that might tilt the scales once more. Chivalry versus necessity. This decision wasn't made lightly or with malice, but rather from a position of cold strategic necessity. The very essence of survival skewed Henry's choice, reducing chivalry to a bystander in the savage calculus of medieval warfare. Chivalric codes, often held aloft like banners of honor, found themselves trampled by the brute demands of war. The king, beleaguered and weary, resolved that the safety of his army outweighed the imperatives of noble conduct. This stark resolution flew directly into the face of martial customs and was born from a need to assert dominance without reopening the bloody door to battle. For Henry, the repercussions of this brutal decision were clear. It was a gamble with not just his tactical aims, but his legacy. a tightrope walk between perceived ruthlessness and necessary rule. The principles of chivalry clashed with his harsh realities, threatening to recalibrate a fragile legacy. Kingship entangled with chivalric ideals demanded a delicate balance, and Henry's choice risked shattering the polished sheen of honor that accompanied a warrior king's reputational armor. Yet in this calculus, immediate survival and deterrence superseded the potential for historical condemnation. The soldiers' ethical turmoil. For the soldiers bidden to carry out Henry's grim directive, the emotional toll was monumental. Hours earlier, they had been immersed in the brutal ballet of battle, testing themselves against the specter of death. Now they were thrust into the murky waters of ethical turmoil, ordered to dispatch helpless prisoners. The sanctity of prisoners, a tacit rule in their world of war, lay shattered at their feet. These archers and footmen, hardened by battle, yet tethered to codes of honor, found themselves at war with their conscience, forced to toe the line between duty and moral compromise. Stripped of the veneer of victory, these men navigated a barren moral landscape, thrust unwilling into a tableau where survival and slaughter blurred into one. The act itself pierced their notions of chivalry, a reminder of the grim paradox where war's nobility and savagery intertwine. Such acts took a psychological toll that transcended individual experience, reshaping the shared identity and memory of Henry's battle-hardened force. Here, the bitter truth of war's demands laid bare. Chivalry's romanticized vision crumbled under the weight of necessity, its illusions shattered deftly as arms met with existential threat. Warfare's arena, once seen as noble and valorous, became a testament to the brittle interplay of honor and survival. At Agincourt, the immediate threat of captured knights mingled with the ambient winds of defeat, challenging that delicate balance. Yet amid all this, the mosaic of brutality painted a vivid picture of medieval war, where ideologies were routinely sacrificed at the altar of survival. Reverberations across Europe. The execution order reverberated across the Channel, weaving through the courts of Europe in a storm of whispers and rumor. In England, it was retold as a harrowing yet necessary decision, cloaked in the banners of triumph and English valor. Across Europe, the tale traveled with an air of grim allure, an unconcealed illustration of the era's stark realities. This narrative weaved itself into discussions that crossed chivalric customs and wartime conduct, questioning the rules even safely beyond the thundering of the battlefield cannons. Henry's legacy, ruthless ruler or astute king. Throughout this all, the looming question hung heavily over Henry. Would his actions ripple beyond the immediate clamor, tarnishing his legacy forever? Or would the annals of history regard him as a king, astute and decisive? Agincourt's muddy folklore, interwoven with tales and truths, cast Henry as both legend and man, a ruler whose brushstrokes of history sat firmly in both valor and pragmatic necessity. In the intricacies of his reign, Henry's decision became an undeniable part of his legacy, illustrating the deep tug between chivalric ideals and the enduring pressures of sovereignty. His choice underscored the fraught, intricate dance of ruling wisely amid dark realities, a tale that reverberates through time. As fate steers modern conflicts and shapes rulers, one truth remains clear. Agincourt's lessons endure, whispering still from the mud-choked fields of its origin. The aftermath, silence and significance. In the raw aftermath of the Battle of Agincourt, the mist hung low over fields that had witnessed unimaginable carnage, mingling with the acrid scent of blood and sweat. The chaos of battle had given way to an eerie silence. King Henry V, standing amidst the remnants of this frenetic clash, might not have anticipated how this victory would resound through the annals of history. Facing an army 3 times its size, the English had achieved something that seemed to defy both logic and the laws of warfare. This feat was no mere military triumph. To many, it was a divine act, an improbable miracle that entwined reality with legend, transforming the ordeal into a cornerstone of English myth and identity. Strategic brilliance in nature's role. Beneath the myth, however, lay the mechanics of an expertly executed strategy. King Henry, with a tactical acumen sharpened by necessity, leveraged the narrowness of the battlefield, turning the French numerical advantage into a liability. Hemmed in by dense woods, the French cavalry charged toward the English lines, only to be ensnared by the muddy terrain, their armor weighing them down, transforming valor into unwieldy liability. English longbowmen, hidden behind their sharpened stakes, unleashed a relentless barrage, their arrows piercing the armor that once promised invulnerability. This muddy quagmire became a trap where French knights proud of their chivalric valor found themselves mired and drowning in soil that sought to devour them. English men-at-arms, though outnumbered, held the line, turning those muddy fields into a death trap. What emerged from those hours of grim struggle was not a tale of honor, but a stark lesson in the brutal calculus of survival. Henry V, from king to legend. Emerging victorious from this chaos, Henry V was no longer just a king. He became a legend, a hero whose leadership in strife cemented his status across Europe. His decisive actions underscored the brutal reality of medieval rule, or an era where crowns were forged in the crucible of war. Agincourt lifted Henry from a precarious claimant to a heroic figure celebrated for his judicious strategy and sheer willpower, forever altering his destiny and setting his name among the ranks of England's warrior kings. His deeds at Agincourt would later inspire Shakespeare, who immortalized the saga in prose, etching his triumph into the cultural fabric of a nation. Agincourt's impact on France and military doctrine. For the French, Agincourt was a debacle of monumental proportions, a harrowing reflection on the futility of outdated valor and the obsolescence of old strategies. Forced to confront the rigid adherence to knightly combat, the French nobility reeled from this devastating defeat. Agincourt represented a rude awakening, a spur that demanded change, provoking military and social reforms within a divided France. The terrain and tactics that had favored Henry V led to a broader realization of the need for adaptation and innovation, paving the way for modernization as traditional chivalric combat gave way to integrated military strategies. As silence returned to the fields, the fallen of Agincourt became both a grim monument to war's cost and the silent heralds of change. Nearly 6,000 French soldiers, many of them noble, lay dead, a stark testament to the scale of the disaster. Yet for the English, the victory was tempered by the toll it had taken. Though significantly outnumbered, they suffered the loss of hundreds, and the aftermath became a moment of somber reflection on the price of triumph. The enduring legend. The legend of Agincourt quickly transcended into poems, songs, and plays. The phrase "band of brothers," immortalized by Shakespeare, echoed the camaraderie and shared valor of those who stood against all odds. The battle became a symbol of national resilience and courage, experiences that invigorated the English spirit for generations. Meanwhile, across Europe, the narrative of Agincourt was a cautionary tale of the unpredictable nature of warfare, encapsulating the consequences of underestimating one's enemy. The echoes of Agincourt inspired and reshaped future confrontations, illustrating how sound tactics could triumph over superior numbers. The battle demonstrated that strategic ingenuity could orchestrate what seemed like miracles, becoming a testament to human determination. For both England and France, the lessons learned at Agincourt reshaped military doctrines, alternately celebrated for its strategic brilliance or studied as a reminder of chivalric arrogance. The legacy of Agincourt wasn't merely military, it became a narrative of resilience, valor, and transformation. It exemplified the ethos of medieval warfare through the stories of ordinary soldiers rising to extraordinary feats, a narrative that was celebrated as much for the human spirit as for military prowess. The battle stands as a reflection of an era, a testament to the complex, gritty realities of the medieval world. Even now, Agincourt resonates, casting a unified narrative that continues to intrigue, a symbol of the enduring dance between struggle and triumph in human history. The tale endures, a haunting melody in history's long and intricate song. Factors of victory: nature, discipline, and chance. The Battle of Agincourt, fought on a muddy field on October 25, 1415, was not simply a clash of swords and wills. It was an extraordinary confluence of nature, discipline, chance, and human valor. As dawn broke, the English found themselves on a battlefield transformed by the night's rain into a quagmire. This soaked earth, a silent conspirator, worked against the French, who sunk and struggled in their heavy armor. The very land seemed to favor the outnumbered English, as if the elements themselves had chosen sides. Mist hung in the air, shrouding movements and sounds, wrapping the world in an eerie, claustrophobic embrace. For the French knights, this natural trap turned their anticipated triumph into a harrowing march of doom. English discipline versus French bravado, yet human factors played an equally critical role. In contrast to the French forces, confident in their numbers and noble lineage, the English army was disciplined and united. Under the leadership of King Henry V, every soldier understood his part in the grand scheme. The French, with fractured commands and a tendency towards reckless bravado, charged like a chaotic mob rather than a coordinated force. Their crowded ranks became entangled, and their overconfidence became their undoing. Meanwhile, the English, though exhausted and numbered among the few, stayed resolute and sharply focused, working together like the gears of a well-oiled machine. The narrow battlefield, a strategic advantage. Fate, ever the capricious player, had cast the battlefield as a narrow corridor flanked by thick woods. This constriction worked to the English advantage, neutralizing the French cavalry's famed flanking techniques. The dense throng of French knights, unable to effectively maneuver, was funneled directly into the English stronghold. The terrain became their enemy, amplifying the ferocity of the English defense. As archers rained arrows with deadly precision, the English lines, fortified and unyielding, turned the narrowness of the land into a fortress, a graveyard for French ambition. Pragmatism over pretentiousness. Simpler in arms but not in cunning, the English faced the armored French knights with weapons of raw practicality. The archers, unmatched in their art, exploited every vulnerability, targeting exposed joints and faces in the French armor. This pragmatic warfare, born of necessity, sliced through the French ranks like an invisible hand, rendering their superior armor a hindrance rather than a shield. The English fought not with pretentious regalia, but with raw skill and adaptability, their simplicity becoming lethal grace against French vanity. Divine favor or steadfast belief? Superstition, that ever-present medieval specter, wove through the battlefield as both English and French soldiers looked for divine signs and protection. The French trusted in their noble banners, believed to be blessed. Yet this reliance yielded no favor on the sodden grounds of Agincourt. The English, on the other hand, seemed to sense divine exhilaration within their midst, inspired by Henry's command. Blending personal faith with martial duty, it was a belief that soared above mortal fear, a silent moral force that solidified their will to fight, a tribute to a storied past. As dust ascended and the field lay strewn with the aftermath of carnage, the echoes of ancient valor pulsed through English hearts. This day was steeped in the legacy of past heroes, breathing life into tales of Arthurian knights and legendary victories. For Henry and his men, it was not merely a battle, it was a tribute to a storied past, a pledge fulfilled in blood and resolve. Agincourt became a theater of echoes where myth and reality converged, leaving an imprint on English identity that resonated beyond mere history. Individual heroism and collective resolve. Every soldier at Agincourt, noble or commoner, became part of an epic saga. The battle was not just a canvas for grand strategy, but a tapestry of individual heroism where unnamed swordsmen stood as pillars of endurance and courage. In their gritty stand lay the heart of Agincourt's legacy, a reminder that true valor often resides in the spirit of ordinary men thrust into extraordinary roles. Their collective resolve redefined heroism, reclaiming the narrative from chivalric legend and responding to the insistent call of survival. Tales carried home. When the survivors returned to England, they carried with them tales that would echo through time. Around crackling fires and within ale-sodden taverns, their stories spun webs of memory, lacing personal experiences with the mythos of Agincourt. These tales, ripe with raw emotion and surreal triumph, painted Agincourt not only as a victory but as a testament to the perils and splendor of war. They transcended mere wartime recall, becoming emblems of valor and human tenacity shared throughout the generations. Agincourt's enduring symbolism. Agincourt is more than a historical event. It is etched into cultural consciousness as a symbol of miraculous resolve against insurmountable odds. Its story is told not just through the cold lens of history, but through the warm, breathing glow of legend that bathes it in eternal light. This battle's transformation from historic reality to legendary narrative illustrates our enduring compulsion to seek courage amid chaos. In every retelling, Agincourt lives on, a story sculpted by time into a vivid reminder of both human struggle and the timeless dance of fate and valor.